I'd like the record to reflect that I was here at 5:30, albeit at a very low chair, and that other people were chatting away until our usual late start time of 8 minutes after, very low. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So this being our first official meeting of 2019, I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. That's our first item on our agenda, and our second item is to reach the request for budget adjustments. We have two routine items which are detailed on the meeting agenda. Ms. Cromick, BET Clerk, can you please move these items?
I'd like to move number ED9, the Board of Education, $536,000 for an additional appropriation for the Greenwich High School water damage. And HD4, the Health Department, $15,248, approval to use the HER grant.
Okay. Is there a second for those items? Moved by Ms. Cromick, seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Ms. Moriarty, can you please give the Budget Committee report?
Yes, this item was presented to the BET Budget Committee by Mr. Mayo, Interim Superintendent of the schools. The request is for an appropriation, as you heard, for $536,000. The cost is to cover the cost to repair the damage from a leak in the Performing Arts Center Galleria. The damage occurred when a flexible connection in the piping for the heating system failed in the ceiling of the Galleria. This failure released a significant amount of very hot water into the area, causing damage to the drywall, the electrical outlets, some of the lights, as well as running down the Galleria and entering areas to the south in the gym and to the north, which was the auditorium lobby and at the very entrance of the actual auditorium. The request for the interim is to allow the Board of Education to begin their repairs immediately. These funds would come from the capital and non-recurring fund. The town's insurance coverage is expected to cover the cost after a $25,000 deductible. These are covering eligible costs. The insurance proceeds would go into the capital and non-recurring fund when they are received. The vote of the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
And is there a report on H?
Yes, there is. So we got item HD4 from the Health Department, which was approval to use the HERR grant of $15,248. The HERR grant, which is the Health Education Risk Reduction Grant. This is an extension to a previous 3-year contract. The funds will support the Health Department's efforts to obtain a National Public Health accreditation. They want to use the funds to hire a consultant to assist them with the application. The vote at the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Is there any discussion on either of these two items? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to take a voice and hand vote on ED9 and HD4. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those items have carried 12-0-0. Mr. Bernstein and Mr. Mayo, thank you both for being here this evening.
Jill, do you want to send Tom Bird an email and Alexis?
About the votes?
About that formal vote?
Sure.
Because they have to report that tonight.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Okay, we also have two requests for budget adjustments that I have designated as non-routine. Mike, before you want to maybe wait. The first item is PD4 for the police. Is there a motion for this item? A motion by Ms. Tarkington. And second? by Mr. Weisbrod. Okay. Ms. Moriarty, please give the Budget Committee report.
So this request was from the Police Department, approval to use funds of $358,255 for the purchase of software and hardware to overlay an electronic fire and EMS dispatch protocol system onto the existing dispatch system. These funds will come from Greenwich's allocation of the state's 911 surcharge revenue, which is required by the town to be used to support the town's 911 system. Those funds are received by the town quarterly and accumulate in a restricted reserve fund. This system, the improvements to the system will allow the 911 operator to provide quicker assistance to the caller and will enable the dispatcher to provide more complete information to the EMS or fire responders. The vote was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moriarty. So are there any, Mr. Mason, comments on PD4?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for putting this as non-routine. This item, I think, is very important publicly. We write guidelines every year. We talk about finding efficiencies. We talk about increasing levels of service to the community and doing it financially in a proper way. As I understand this, GEMS found a software program that enhances their response to an emergency call, which has an added series of questions that the fire department uses and law enforcement. It's being funded through a grant. It may have some operational costs, but going forward. But when we see three departments get together to work on something like this, where there's no increased cost to the taxpayers, and there's certainly a benefit, I just think that needs to be highlighted. And I commend the three departments on it, and I'm really glad that they went and did this. This is what we encourage departments to do in our guidelines and our budget deliberations. So I'm very happy that, and I hope we all vote on it again, but I'm very happy to see this before us tonight, and I supported it in Budget Committee along with my colleagues, and I'm just glad this item is here before us tonight.
Okay, are there further comments on this item? Okay. Mr. Mason, thank you for highlighting it and highlighting the cooperation of the public safety departments. All in favor, motion PD4 moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Weisbrod. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The next non-routine item, NW2 for Nathaniel Witherell, a release of conditions on gym expansion. Can I have a motion? That item has been moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded? Seconded by Ms. Crumick. Okay. Ms. Moriarty, can you please give the Budget Committee report?
Yes, this project came to the BET in last year's budget approval. The project was for the rehabilitation gym to expand that and improve the facility. The estimated cost at that time was for $272,000 to be funded with the $182,000 STEEP grant, which the Nathaniel Witherell had applied and got permission to receive, plus up to $90,000 contribution from the Friends of Nathaniel Witherell. The project recently went out to bid, and the lowest qualifying bids came in for a total of $192,700. If you add a 10% contingency to those bids, the project is expected to come in around $212,000. Given the revised numbers, with the STEEP grant still being at $182,000, that means that the contribution from the Friends to make up the difference is $30,000. So that's how we get to the request before us tonight for $30,000 release of conditions. The condition was written that the requirement was just confirmation of receipt of the Friends funds by the town, and that has been confirmed by the controller with the document that we had in our packet and also with an email from the controller. So if some questions came up at our meeting that if the project were to exceed the $212,000, which this release of conditions would cover, how would the project be funded? And we were told that the Friends would be able to cover the additional cost for the project above that, but they would need to come back to the BET for a release of conditions for additional funds. That's not expected to be the case, however. So the vote at the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend release of the funds.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, this item has been moved by Ms. Tarkenton, seconded by Ms. Crumick. It's the release of condition for Nathaniel Witherall. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The next item on our agenda this evening is the assessor's report. The assessor is out today, not feeling well, and so we don't have a representative from that office. If there are questions on the report, can you please email them to our assessor, and I'm sure she will respond as soon as she's back in the office feeling better. Ms. Tarkenton. Leslie, thank you. Ms. Tarkenton, thank you for pointing that out. I want to ask the BT, does anyone have a question that would prevent them from accepting the report at this meeting? Seeing no indication, can I have a motion to accept the assessor's report? Oh, so we have a motion made by Ms. Tarkenton, seconded by Mr. Raymer. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The next item on our agenda this evening is the Comptroller's Report. Mr. Minarski, please join us.
Good evening, Madam Chair and BET members. Let me get this in the way. You have a copy of the Comptroller's Report. Up quickly, I have one update, but the opening item, we had another very good year with low rates on the bonding and the short-term borrowing. And we reaffirmed our AAAs with S&P and Moody's. One update to this area, and I'll open up to questions. The IBIC, the Independent Bond and Investment Consultants, sold their business, and they were going into the 5th year of their contract. They will be closing their doors February 8th, and I will have to go out for request for proposal. That's the bad news. The good news is that potentially they could resurface under, I don't know the name of the firm, it's a national firm out of Dallas that I've never heard of, but they could potentially resurface as the financial advisors next year. The way the RFP works and the contract works with the financial advisor is they basically do the bulk of their work starting in November when they call me, and together Bill Lindsay and I work on the official statement, and then we get together and we pull the bond counsel, Robinson Cole, in to review our work, and then we go through the credit rating reviews, and then we end up going to market. We do not need the services of the financial advisors normally through February through, say, November. However, every 2 years, we go out and we do the debt and the fund balance policies, and we sometimes need the services of Mr. Lindsay. The last year was unusual because we had a new group of folks that come in. They're known as RTM members, and they got involved pretty heavily. And they went through the learning curve, and Bill Lindsay helped out. I know Leslie Moriarty can attest to the work they've put in. They've attended all the meetings. They got heavily involved with the debt policy model, with all the different scenarios. But anyway, that's the update, and I'll have to go out for an RFP for financial advisor. As I said, they were going to go into their 5th year, so we'll be looking at that as far as an RFP. Any questions on the controller's report or the financer? I'll answer at this point.
Ms. Moriarty.
I just wanted to ask a question about the RFP for Munis, and that's currently being written now.
I wrote it. It's now being structured in purchasing.
I was wondering if there are any additional services or modules or other innovation type ideas that will be able to come through in responses to that RFP, or is it a strict replacement of what we currently have?
It would be predominantly a replacement of what we have. As I stated at the last month's meeting, we no longer use the payroll module except for read-only. We have ADP. We don't use the tax assessor and the tax collector module. We have quality data systems. And one of the modules we're looking at 3 areas. Cash receipts, potentially down the road, we want to resurrect the concept of centralizing cash receipts. That's come up a number of years, and it never has really taken off, but we want to look at the cash receipts module. We want to look at the grants module. We're looking for improvement in areas of improvement in the grants accounting. And the third one has to do with the GASB pronouncement, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, where we have to do lease accounting. And we're looking at a module that will enable us to account for leases through there. So that's the 3 areas. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at the same general ledger, budget module, accounts payable modules. So it's predominantly a replacement of the existing
Right. It
systems.
sounds like that you considered new modules that might help improve tracking and productivity, but
Correct.
It would be good if there are other potential applications out there that might also help with productivity if the RFP is written in such a way to encourage a response to identify those.
One potential area, and I'm not prepared to get into that because I want to see what the Bloom-Shapiro report says. There's been criticisms of the Munis product in the area of capital project accounting. And as I said, I'd like to see the report before I commented on it. So that's also an area that we might look at as far as capital project tracking and see what's out there. And it'll also be an opportunity for the Board of Education people to see what's out there in that area too. But I'd like to see the Bloom-Shapiro report before I go further as far as commenting on that.
Mr. Drake, did you have a question? You had indicated
No.
before.
Ms. Moriarty asked the question.
Okay. Ms. Hess?
Pete, would you, as part of this RFP, would you just also just ask generally, thank you, David, would you just ask generally about other modules that are available that others may be using? I think it would be helpful to say, what are other things that are out there that maybe we don't even know exist, so we don't even know to ask to put in the RFP. So maybe what else might you recommend that might be helpful? And a simple example might be like bank reconciliations. A lot of these general ledger systems now actually can do your bank reconciliation. So I think rather than being so specific about the existing modules and maybe a couple of others, but to ask more of an open-ended, what other modules are out there that might be interesting? And I think you might learn that there's other things out there that we could, that would be very helpful from an efficiency, effective, data integrity perspective.
Yep, agreed, and thank you. Yep.
Ms. Tarkington?
I agree to both yours and Deborah's comments is we'll simply ask for an inventory of everything that's out there. And just, if we see something that we find interesting during the process, it's not only Tyler, there's going to be other firms that bid on it. We'd like to see the competition. Someone else might offer a module that might not necessarily win the contract, but we might have an interest in getting a piece of what they offer that Munis might not offer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Mason.
My question, what Ms. Tarkington answered, what is Munis come from Tyler Technologies? Because if you go to about the 5th page on our webpage and look at the menu of modules they have, it's a worthwhile read. I was just verifying that. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, I think Mr. Weisbrod had it.
No, he was giving me the microphone again. He's being a gentleman. I just to kind of follow up, and maybe this is too detailed, but I'll just ask anyway. When you put out a bid like this and you have all these different requests that you want to get information on, and if you find that one vendor can give you 3 out of 5, and then you've got 2 other vendors each give you 1 or the other, will that then break up into maybe potentially 3 projects? Do you have that ability to kind of pick and choose, or do you have to go with one vendor that can give you everything?
No, we basically, we're looking to replace everything we've got. The budget, general ledger, accounts payable. In addition, we have an interest in cash receipts and the other the modules, the leasing, accounting that I mentioned before. We currently have the modules broken up between Tyler Technologies or Munis, ADP, and Quality Data Services. Before a number of you got here, I think some of you remember how Ted Gortney always used to come before the BET and complain about Munis month after month after month. So right now, we currently have broken it up into 3 different companies. So my point I was trying to make was, if there's something that really we're interested in, like a construction module or something like that, and Munis doesn't offer it, we would look at trying to get that service from them. Our options are open at this point.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is your mic on?
I would just like to congratulate you on the success of the debt issuance and the good work, done with your financial organization that you work with. I would also like to compliment you on the section in this report that addresses the risk management, particularly the reimbursements, the details in the reimbursements on the 3 different projects that we've had underway in the Board of Education, and your follow-up and the information on how much insurance has been reimbursed to date and so forth. So I think that's very helpful, and I want to thank you and the staff that must have worked with you in order to put this together. So thank you, Pete.
On behalf of Megan, you're welcome, and a lot of the cooperation from the Board of Education across the field there. Everybody's been working together on this one. These 3.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Mr. Mynarski? I think we all echo the compliments of the dedication of your staff in completing the bond financings.
Thank you.
I know you do that annually since they come through really right over the holidays, first of the year. Thank you for your attention to that. Can I have a motion to accept the controller's report?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Tarkington. She was the loudest one in the room. Can I have a second, please? Seconded by Mr. Raymer. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report, which shows investing portfolio activity for the month of December 2018. Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? Hearing none, I note that the BET has received the report. Next item on the agenda is the BET Standing Committee reports, of which tonight we don't have any, so we move on to the BET Liaison reports. Ms. Moriarty, please provide an update from the Education Liaisons.
Ms. Hess and I are the education liaisons, and we're on the project team for the Board of Ed Capital Processes Review. On January 14th, last Monday, I guess it was, we met with the consultant as well as the other members of the oversight group from the Board of Ed, as well as Mr. Geiger and Ms. Frame, who are working with us on that, to get an update report. The consultant presented the status of their work, including some preliminary observations. They expect to complete their work in early February, and the final report will include their findings and the recommendations. Once the final report is completed, it then becomes the responsibility of the full BET and the Board of Ed on what the next steps would be. And I believe our chair is planning to have this item as part of the February 19th BET meeting.
Yes, thank you. I've been working and talking with the Board of Education Chair, Peter Bernstein, and we've agreed to try to coordinate a joint session so that the consultants can present their report to both boards at the same time in the interest of both efficiency and cooperation. So right now we're targeting February 19th, which is the date of our regular February meeting, to have that report. There's been a lot of community interest in that as well, so we look forward to getting the results. Ms. Moriarty, thank you for that report. The next item is the BET Special Project Team reports. This evening we have a brief report from the Nathaniel Witherell Strategic Planning Committee. Mr. Deuce, can you please provide that report?
Yes, thank you, Jill. It may not be that brief. As many of you know, last summer, the BET Nathaniel Witherell Strategic Planning Committee engaged a Health Dimensions Group to provide the committee with an operating and a strategic analysis of the Nathaniel Witherell. After about 4 months of work, HDG provided the committee with a still incomplete 100-plus page draft of its report last December for a preliminary review by the committee. We, and that is really Bill Drake, thank you, Bill, collected and returned comments to HDG in early January. Our hope at the time was that we would be in a position to have HDG share its findings with the full BET and with the board of the Nathaniel Witherell later in January. We had scheduled a presentation for January 23rd, but as you may have heard, we have postponed that. On January 10th, the committee had a webinar with HDG to review a 125-slide summary of their report. We had received that a few days earlier, and it included an analysis of the several strategic options that we'd asked them to review, and that included continuing as is, but with a reduced staff, sale release to a not-for-profit, and finally a sale release to a for-profit entity. To be fair to HDG, this last section was delayed, had been delayed in part because the analysis on the finance side that we'd asked another consultant, PFK O'Connor, to provide had been delayed. Specifically, we'd asked them to help us review the Nathaniel Witherell financials and to prepare a translation of their financials from the town's GASB to a not-for-profit's FASB. And I should add that Deborah was very helpful in working with them and moving the process along. Anyway, after the webinar on January 10th, we concluded that the presentation was not ready for the full BET. And among the open items, we've asked them to prepare an executive summary of its findings and recommendations. And that's not ready yet. We hope to have that presentation as soon as possible. We're not ready to schedule it yet. I will say that we do have a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the Gisborne room. We invite everyone here to attend. Not that we all can fit in that room, but you're welcome to try to get in. We will discuss the consultants' reports, and I'll add the usual hedge language. The reports remain in draft form and have been neither approved or accepted by the committee as yet. I think I'd like to ask Bill to add a couple other thoughts on the other consultant before we ask for questions.
The accountants, PKF, have done a great deal of work, as Andy said, with Deborah's help and everybody's help, Peter's help, Roland's help, to create financial statements for the withdrawal, and they've been created in draft form. They're nearly complete. Tom Marion of PKF sent an email in the last couple hours saying he expects to have the near final draft at the end of this week. So we're within days of having that part of the project completed.
Thank you, Bill and Andy, for Mr. Drake and Mr. Deuce for that update. I particularly want to thank all members of that committee who have been hard at work. It is a significant undertaking that will result in a lot of useful information for the town and for this board. So while the presentation to the BET has been deferred until a later date, it's not. It's really to fine-tune the presentation and to get a fuller understanding of the recommendations. And please stay tuned because we will want each one of you to be fully informed about the results and have an opportunity to ask questions. So thank you for your efforts on that behalf and the report. We also have a report tonight from the New Lebanon Building Committee. Mr. Drake, can you provide an update on that as well?
The New Lab School is proceeding well. You remember, this project had a $37.2 million budget. We expect to be under budget. That's a great outcome. We've received $15.7 million already from the state, as Mr. Minarski put in his report. That was very helpful. The opening and first day for the students to be in this building is Tuesday, February 18th, which is the day after President's Day, which is the last day of the vacation, I think. And we're going to have a ceremony to open it on Saturday, because Tuesday's not a good day for parents and others to have an opening ceremony. So the opening ceremony is planned for Saturday, February 23rd. We're working to do something loud, lively, and beautiful. This is a great outcome. Every person in this room can be proud of what's going to be done. So please come on Saturday, February 23rd. That's really the opening and completion of the school. The project has also, of course, to tear down the old school, which will happen once we move into the new, and to build on the site of the old school parking lots and playgrounds. That's on the west side of the new school, and to fix the playing field on the north side of the new school. So all of that remains to be done, and will be done over the summer, and as soon as possible for it to be done, it will be done. So this is a great outcome. Please come on February 23rd. It's headed in an excellent direction.
That's true. Mr. Minarski. Yes.
I think it's 10 to noon, but I'll send you all an email and be sure.
That's yes. That's terrific. That's terrific news. Thank you for including the BET in this update and in the invitation. And it is really an accomplishment as well. So great news. Which brings us to the next item of our agenda, which is under old business. We have in the packet, we did a first read last month of a resolution recommending additional stipends for the Registrar of Voters. And we get to the vote and the second read this month. Is there a motion to put this on the table?
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, can you please give a report from the HR Committee?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this, as Madam Chairman just said, was up for a first read at last month's meeting. We have since gone back and added some detail to reflect the historical resolution the BET has passed specifically in 2014, 2016, and this is really for 2018. With that, I also want to be sure to thank Ms. Vasiliotis for her editing help in doing the research and adding those couple of years into the resolution, as well as adding the cost projection at the bottom. So she's done some stress testing there as to what the cost could be. I do have one change that I'd like to make, and I have discussed this with Ms. Vasiliotis, just for clarity purposes, and I promise to keep wordsmithing to a minimum, but in the resolved section at the very top, beginning in line 4, is to make 3 very minor changes, and again, the purpose is only to give clarity. In line 4, first to strike the word additionally, so that sentence would begin in the event. After the word registrars in that line, add the word each, so it would read both registrars each will receive, and change the word the to that, $1,500 stipend. So let me read it now as changed. In the event of a single party primary, both registrars each will receive that $1,500 stipend.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Is there a discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, with the clarification to the language to indicate exactly what we're voting on, this item's been moved by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Mr. Turner. We have a resolution to correct these salaries for the registrar of voters. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one other item under the Human Resources Committee Old Business Report is to give my fellow members the schedule now of department presentations for additional headcount and reclassifications of jobs, as well as M&C. We will hear the first M&C presentation on January 30th. We will have an M&C vote on February 5th. Also on January 30th and February 5th, we will have department presentations for proposed new headcount, proposed changes in the table of organization, and reclassifications, with a vote on those positions on February 19th.
So the HR committee is meeting on January 30th, February 5th, and February 19th to take up the budget actions of changes in headcount and table of organization.
Correct. January 30th is the first M&C presentation. February 5th is the vote on the M&C recommendation or presentation. January 30th and February 5th will be the department presentations on any proposed changes to the table of organization, reclassifications, or additional headcount. And February 19th will be the vote on those positions. Absolutely. That's all from here, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. We now move to new business. We have a couple of items of new business this evening. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of an acting treasurer, Natalia Yemetz. You have all received in front of you a draft resolution that speaks to the appointment of Natalia Yemetz as acting treasurer. I will put this resolution on the table as I will move it, and I'll ask for a second, and then I will go into the background. So moved by Ms. Oberlander. Is there a second for the resolution? Seconded by Mr. Raymer. Okay. As you all know, our treasurer, Kathleen Murphy, has submitted her resignation effective January 31st, 2019. We have, this position has been posted, and a number of applicants have indicated an interest. And given the amount of time it takes to review, interview, and identify a successor treasurer, it has been recommended that we appoint an acting treasurer to perform the duties of treasurer from February 1st, 2019 until such time as a replacement is identified and appointed. We have in our finance department, assistant treasurer Natalia Yametz. She goes by Natasha, for those of you who know her. And she's agreed to perform all the duties of the town treasurer during this time period. And this resolution effectuates that appointment, where she will continue to perform the duties of assistant treasurer and perform the treasurer function, so that we are covered during the interview period. She will, as other employees, receive a small stipend to do this additional workload, and the BET will have participation in the interview process for the replacement treasurer. Bill Drake and David Weisbrod have agreed to participate in those interviews. And Peter, is there anything that, Mr. Winarski, anything you would like to add?
Just that we got 52 applicants. The process is the departments don't get to see them until they've been vetted by the Human Resources Department. They were promised as early as this week. What we'll do is, let's assume that they come down with 10 of them. I will get copies from the HR department and give to Mr. Drake and Weisbrod, and then we'll have to coordinate an interview team with interview questions as to how many people we want to interview. Usually we have a minimum of 3 or 4 people that we interview to go through the process. We expect this to be a lengthy process because of the number of applicants and the number of interviews that will be conducted. So she's just simply, it's a charter position. When I was out on medical leave, you had to have a backup to the controller. In the signing capacity, it's the same thing with the treasurer, or if the assessor was out at an extended period of time.
Right. Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions about this resolution? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The second item of new business we have today is an OPEB investment policy statement amendment. Can I have a motion to put this on the floor? So I have a motion by Mr. Raymer and a second by Mr. Deuce. Mr. Weisbrod, can you please provide the report of the Investment Advisory Committee?
Yes, Madam Chair. So what we have here is essentially a housekeeping matter. We're adding the asset class of cash or near cash investments to include U.S. Treasuries, agencies, and FDI-insured certificates of deposit as eligible assets for the OPEB trust to invest in. That's the first change, and the second change is, well, that is the change, and it's reflected both on page 1 and on page 2 by including that category in the subclass, and then wording to that effect in the second page.
And did the Investment Advisory Committee vote on this item?
We did, and it was a unanimous vote in favor.
Are there any questions regarding the change in the OPEB Trust Investment Policy Statement, which you've received in your packet? Okay. Hearing none, can I have a vote on approving this amendment? All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item has carried 12-0-0. Which brings us to the chair's report, which is very brief this month. Just a reminder that the First Selectman and the Board of Education will present their proposed budgets on Thursday evening, starting at 6 p.m. And the presentations will be followed by a Budget Committee public hearing on the budget. And then, shortly thereafter, the Budget Committee will start their hearing process. We'll spend a lot of time together over the next 2 months, as Ms. Maury already reminded us earlier today in caucus. And I want to thank you in advance for the time that you're going to spend and your dedication and commitment to the town and our constituents. And, of course, a thank you to the Finance Department staff for the time that they'll spend as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Ms. Moriarty?
I know that departments have been asking, but also committees of the RTM have been asking for this actual schedule by departments. It should be available by Thursday. We're just checking and confirming availability of certain individuals to be present, but it is almost complete. And it will be posted then, but one, you'll get it as an email, but we'll also post it in the budget page of the government website, if we get permission, I guess, to allow that page to be up there. But hopefully we will have not too many revisions as we go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Oh, and I have one other item for the chair's report. As referenced earlier in the item of new business, Kathleen Murphy will be retiring at the end of this month, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to thank her on behalf of this board for her service to the town. Ms. Murphy has spent 12 years overseeing the treasury function, including cash receipting, bank reconciliation, and cash management. She's been the trustee to the OPEB Trust Fund since January 2008. She worked to develop unique OPEB presentations for OPEB members at their monthly meetings and supplied up-to-date performance results and manager search information. She actively was engaged in the switch to the outside payroll vendor, ADP, and she plays a major role in payroll funding and reconciliation issues. She also developed the current certificate of deposit and treasury investment programs, which enhance the town's revenues. And during her tenure, she worked tirelessly with banking institutions to ensure the best and lowest fees for banking services. She provided valuable assistance annually to the auditors in completion of the CAFR, and she provides us with the monthly treasurer's report. So she'll be big shoes to fill in our interview process, and I want to thank her on behalf of the BET. Mr. Drake. Absolutely, it's a very good suggestion. I'll turn that into a thank you letter sometime in the next 9 days, I guess, aside from the BET. So, and that concludes my chair's report, which brings us to the last work item of the meeting, which is approval of the BET minutes. You've all received draft minutes from the December 17th, 2018 regular meeting of the BET. So we have a motion by Ms. Tarkenton, seconded by Mr. Mason. Are there any questions or comments to these minutes? Ms. Crumick?
Yes. Under the section toward the end of the minutes, let me just get the page, resolution concerning cash management. Having reviewed the controller's report, I'd like to propose changing the last sentence of that first bullet under resolution concerning cash management to read as follows. Based on 60-day notice from Alvarez and Marcel, the treasurer proposed adding a new broker-dealer firm, Financial Northeastern Securities, Inc., to replace Alvarez and Marcel, adding the Dreyfus Fund family as a mutual fund sponsor, adding Pershing as a custodian holding the CDs, and engaging Pershing to provide software as a source for the IDC rankings of financial institutions. The reason we're doing this is because Clearwater was incorrectly identified as the entity that would provide analytics, and in fact, it's going to be Pershing that is providing software data that can be accessed by our finance department.
Ms. Moriarty?
Can I ask for clarification? When you read that sentence, you changed BNY Mellon to Pershing. Did you intend to do that?
Yes, because Pershing is owned by BNY Mellon, and upon consultation with Mr. Weisbrod, it appeared that that was a more accurate statement.
Ms. Cormick, can you read that one more time?
Happy to. Based on 60-day notice from Alvarez and Marcel, the treasurer proposed adding a new broker-dealer firm, Financial Northeastern Securities, Inc., to replace Alvarez and Marcel, adding the Dreyfus Fund family as a mutual fund sponsor, adding Pershing as custodian holding the CDs, and engaging Pershing to provide software as a source for the IDC rankings of financial institutions.
Any discussion on that proposed amendment to the minutes? All in favor of accepting that proposed addition, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That addition has carried 12-0-0. I have a vote to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes have been accepted.
Could I,
Ms. Crumick?
I'm sorry, could we do that as corrected as opposed to as amended?
Yes, as corrected. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Raymer, did you?
Just a question, and that is, did the resolution as we approve it read correctly, or do we need to go back and correct the resolution as well? The minutes purport to be confirming the event of our having approved the resolution. The resolution as we approved it at that time, did it read correctly?
That is a good point, Mr. Raymer. We will certainly go back and check that, and to the extent that we need to modify the resolution, it will be on the February agenda.
Water, whether the idea was that it would be clear water. It then turned out that clear water charges a fee and that the service could be provided by Pershing without a fee. So it's a good point that Mr. Raymer is making. It may very well have been that the discussion originally could pertain to clear water, but then with subsequent developments, that was unnecessary.
The point was actually brought to my attention by Mrs. Tarkington, who was too shy to speak up.
I find that hard to believe.
That's right. I'm tempted to call fake news on that, but I won't. Okay, Mr. Deuce. Yes.
Before I second that, can I make a suggestion that for the next meeting, we rotate the chairs, because somehow I didn't get the cushy chair. I got one of those chairs that are out in the audience. So I would appreciate it for the next meeting, and I
Okay.
second the adjournment.
Okay, all right. 6:31.
I sent Elaine an email about those dates
building committee, but, you know, it's at the end.
I can finally be
No,
there.
not that the MISA committee would have to do this, but it seemed to be something that happened. Is this, the way things are being done, is this still an operating account item, or would this be a capital? Is this the best way to present this? This is a question we will. It's not?
I would say that the way that the MISA, the stipulations by P&Z were done for MISA, there were several ongoing studies and software tracking obligations that the commission imposed upon the high school once it was in operation. So in my view, this is a study asked by the administration of the traffic once the project was completed and they implemented the solution. So this is an operating cost for the ongoing operation of the building. So I view this as an operating cost.
I mean, if this were in the private sector, would this then be a capital item that would become a depreciable item in terms of you know?
But the fact that it wasn't, requested as a condition before you began the project, I mean, it's like school busing, if they want to redo a traffic study now, it would be later start time. I don't think that's a capital. It's just, that's you read for your bus cost better. I think it's like that.
Not the
No.
same.
No.
That's an easy answer to that one. Can't send it there.
Well, not the amount.
And because this is over 25,000, great for our meeting with the purchasing department, this has to go out for RFP. Over 25,000, according to what we learned when we met with that department.
Oh, absolutely. You know, this cannot be, I mean, you do need approval. You need approval. And I think that it is, it should go out to RFP.
Let's think it should see if the school board is already there.
Yeah, so I think Roland is writing that down, but can we ask Roland if you would communicate?
Would you take a caution to be sure that the school board gives consideration to whether or not it needs to do an RFP and a bid on this?
No.
If it was under 25,000, you had a vendor
Right.
on the list.
This is, we don't have to ask the BOE. We should ask our purchasing.
I was trying to put it nicely. I don't want the school board to commit the contract without focusing on the obligation to do a bidding process.
I think perhaps the person to ask is our head of purchasing. No.
Except this goes through the Board of Ed, who has their own purchasing department. However, just to remind my colleagues, if there is a business that performs this work that's on the state list, state-approved list, then you would not need to do an RFP if you went with that particular vendor?
No, that's not exactly true. You need to then take it through the hierarchy if it's over $25,000. And it has to be like on an emergency basis, not because someone just likes to do it for fun.
If it's on the state-approved list?
Even if it's on the state-approved list, it still, it has to, if it's over $25,000, and this is a traffic study, this needs to go out to bid.
All interesting questions for the school board to resolve with assistance from their purchasing people, giving due regard for the possibilities.
Oh, and also, after having read the town policy manual for purchasing.
Okay. We're not going to resolve that. I want them to resolve that.
Well, I think, again, that's why, Roland, we should make sure that it's
Has somebody moved this item?
Not yet.
I would move this item. Oh, sorry.
I move that we,
Leslie moved this
I
item.
think,
I'm sorry, you approved?
That's
you
right.
moved it?
That's
no,
right.
no.
You can move
I
it.
just heard one motion already.
No,
Do you want to
Leslie
second
can
it?
make the motion.
I move that we approve the
Transfer.
traffic study. I mean, that we, but, also for, prior to our meeting next Tuesday, Roland, if you could just.
It's a
It's
transfer.
not on Tuesday.
It's a transfer.
Oh,
It's up to
okay.
Leslie,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
know.
Just the
I'll let you
follow-up that we
second
said.
it.
So as a routine,
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not, it's seconded. Yeah,
Seconded,
that's
okay. Beth, you have a question?
You decided not to do this? What is driving this particular study? It just seems sort of out of nowhere to start looking at NISA traffic, which
It was a requirement from P and Z when the MISA approval was granted, that once the project was completed and the new traffic pattern was implemented, that a follow-up study would be done.
but does it have to be done now? Could it be done next year?
Should have been done 2 years ago. And as you know,
That sounds like a yes.
there's been a committee formed. I don't know if they're still working, but with the first selectmen and the neighbors and the high school to address traffic and other concerns of the neighbors. So there's a heightened awareness and focus on this particular issue at the high school. School start time changes have exacerbated any problems there, so it is something I think that people are concerned about.
I think this was, didn't we hear something from Ben, and that this is one of the requirements that they all agreed would be executed?
Right.
That, because it was required. So your question is good, and I think that this is something that the town should proceed with based on.
So can I have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Mike, did you vote?
I'm voting in favor, but again, we have questions.
The next item on the agenda is Nathaniel Witherell's request for an additional appropriation, NW3. The request is for $255,000 for the domestic hot water replacement.
Good morning.
While they're getting set up, just to refer my colleagues, this particular capital item is within the fiscal 20 capital request, and Nathaniel Witherell has identified a need to move this up to an additional appropriation.
Right. So good morning. I know you all probably know us, but just for purposes of introduction, I'm Alan Brown. I'm the administrator of the facility. To my right is Tom Ellis, our director of finance, and Jack Hornack, our director of facilities. Again, just a little background. This system, the hot water system that we're talking about, the boilers that generate hot water for the building, was replaced as part of Project Renew. So technically, the system is only 4 years old since the project was completed. We've had problems with the system since it was installed related to rusting and leaking of the boilers. And as a result of those continuing problems, within the first year of operation, all 14 boilers were replaced by the manufacturer under warranty. After those were replaced, within a year after that, they had to be replaced again. And even though they were out of warranty, we negotiated a full replacement by the manufacturer. So we're now in the third round of new boilers. And they continue to malfunction to the extent that at one point recently, 80% of the system's hot water production capacity was out of service, under repair. So as Leslie pointed out, our board had approved replacing the boilers with a new system in the upcoming year's capital budget. That was part of our 15-year capital plan. But because of the ongoing issues and the risk of actually losing hot water, the board became alarmed that if we wait, we'd run into an emergency that conceivably could cause us to have to evacuate the building. And that's why we're asking for an appropriation now. I remain non-committal on how we replace that money compared to where the money would have come next year. That would be in your domain. But we think that we need to replace the system on an emergency basis. Jack can talk a little bit about why the system is malfunctioning, what the history of that malfunction is, and why we think we need to replace it.
You're up.
Yeah.
Or down, one of the two.
A little background
Thank you.
of what Alan had just talked about. history of the problems that we have in fact had with the boilers. During Project Renew, the good thing that they did was put condensing boilers in, and you can see right there the efficiency and the fact that you can exhaust them very easily through the building, which was done quite nicely. And there are also specs on the boilers that we currently have. Alan, can I see that piece of paper? Currently have 14 boilers that heat the entire facility, 8 for domestic hot water, 6 for the laundry. And if you go down a little bit farther, you can see in the first line paragraph under TNW Armstrong boiler history that the boilers were over-designed with an over-need. In fact, for the hot water demand, they overestimated the requirement by 1,160 gallons per hour. And for the kitchen and laundry, it was 870. Problem is that with condensing boilers, if you don't use them all the time, they short cycle. They go on, they go off, they go on, they go off. And that wasn't part of the design. These boilers do that, and they cause the condensing units to corrode and rot out, the igniters and the ignition systems to fail. Quite interestingly, Armstrong, when they came in to do their inspection, their first indication was that the town's water was the problem. TOG's water was no good. So I called Aquarian in and I asked Osprey Engineering to come in and verify that the town's water is up to standards and it's perfect. And then when that result was presented to Armstrong, they reevaluated their concerns and said, well, we have to pull all your heat exchangers out and resolder them. So they did that. A year later, the boilers failed again. And at their expense, they sent a team in and pulled every heat exchanger out, all 14, sent them back to their facility, I think it's in Wisconsin, rebuilt them and sent them back at their expense. And again, the boilers are leaking, the heat exchangers are failing, the igniters aren't working to the point of failure right now. And like Alan said, we ran not too long ago about an 80% failure rate with our boilers. And if that happens and we lose hot water, which we could conceivably do even right now, we can't bring in a separate heating system for that like you can with a generator or anything else. If we don't have hot water, the facility has to be evacuated. So my request is to replace this entire system like we put in the 2020 budget right now.
So you're looking, sorry. Sorry. So the BTU capacity of the new system is even larger.
Yes, it is. That's correct.
But I thought you said that your capacity on the system you put in was a little bit oversized.
We're putting less number of boilers in. We have 14 boilers, 8 for the domestic. We're going to put 4 in for the domestic.
Quite right, quite right.
And for the kitchen and laundry, we had 6. We're going to put 3 in.
Who did the sizing at the time of the original installation?
Want to get into that?
Well, I don't know what the
No,
answer.
that's a joke.
But if you have a contractor who set himself up as a heating engineer and gave you poor advice, I wonder if you have some recourse there.
The project was installed under Project Renew, as you know. The engineering team from SLAM, the architects, was a company out of New York called Siska and Hennessy. They designed all the systems. In this particular design, I fought with the architects and the engineers for months on this design because it would not work. Because I was not the engineering team designed or picked to install the mechanicals in the facility, the board and the chairman of the board, the building committee, overruled what I said.
But just the question is there recourse to that design?
There, after 4 years, gosh, beats me if there could be a recourse to go after Sisk and Hennessy on that. That'd probably be a legal
Statute
matter.
of limitations on a contract claim is 6 years.
We could try that. I think if we're going to go in a direction like that, we need to take action right now and then follow it up with a legal claim against Sisk and Hennessy.
So that's a good subject for another conversation.
I agree.
That doesn't have to take place at this meeting, but I throw that out there. Is the implication, Jack, that had the system been sized correctly, you wouldn't have any of this problem? That leads me to the point of, with some replumbing, could I have taken one or two of these boilers offline, disposed of them, and have a right-sized system that wouldn't be having the problem?
Well, we tried doing that. We tried throttling the systems down to using 4 boilers for the domestic hot water heater, but because of the design of these Armstrong boilers, these particular condensate boilers need to run all the time. And once you don't run all the boilers all the time, you run into the problems we have here. The new boilers, which are a Lochinvar brand, are designed to cycle down but continue to fire so that you don't run into the same problem we're experiencing with the Armstrong boilers.
May I, through the chair, ask Roland a question? Roland, on this application, whether we approve it now as an interim or approve it as part of the fiscal year 20 capital budget, is it bonded?
No, it wasn't bonded in the 1920 budget that they presented.
Can we bond this expense going forward? I'm worrying, my concern is what funds source do we use?
In this case, for the 1920 budget, this was part of the operating deficit that the town would contribute to the payment withdrawal.
So we were going to pay that out of
So we're
fund
gonna pay
balance?
it out of our fund balance, which overall with operation plus capital, it really doesn't change because we're going to end this year $255,000. They are going to end this year $250,000 lower fund balance or a greater deficit of what we planned on funding this year. But if we leave our funding where it is for next year, we'll make it up by the end of next year. So it's not going to do anything.
That's the question, if I may.
Interpret for me, Mike, I'd love it.
If I may, that was what I was asking Roland. This is the capital project in the budget we're working on.
Yeah.
So if you do this now, you have to go to that budget reduce, and then on the current budget that we're in, you increase. So as we look at the thing a little off their checkbook, so we would be putting 255 in this year instead of next year.
So, but for this year, the ultimate source this year is our fund balance.
We would true it up basically next year. We have our contribution as Nathaniel Witherall has been set as part of the budget.
Right.
Unless we go to the RTM, increase it for this year, but there's really no need to
So
do
you'd
that.
be reducing the contribution to Nathaniel Witherell by 255 next year, and that would true it up. And for this year, the fund source this year would be this reduction in fund balance at the year end for us in this
For
fiscal
them.
year.
For them.
For them.
For them. More negative than
Okay,
than
and
we already.
In the budget, is your assumption that their entire capital request is funded through the fund balance,
There
or is
were no
any of it?
borrowings assumed in the capital request.
And is that because why?
Well, when they presented their capital plan a few years ago, there tended to be smaller amounts, 4 to 5, 600,000. And since Project Renew, we've only borrowed 2 projects for close to $1 million each. So aside from that, we really don't have a policy for how small the project really not is.
And I know that, I believe when we looked at the rates we got on our bonding, what we went out to bond for in January, because our 20-year amounts for bonding was relatively small, I think that we paid a premium in the interest cost, or the interest rate that's higher than we would have expected to get at the time, the difference between the 5-year and the 20-year. So I think we want to you don't agree with that analysis, but I think it was 3% that we got for a
20
20-year bond, but in
But
December.
it was a little lower,
It was lower,
2.5
all right.
something,
I
2.55.
just wonder whether we, as a board, should be aware of the size of the 20-year bonding that we authorized during our budget process to know whether it makes sense to pay cash versus go 20-year. But, so let me just finish this. So, what's the size of the rest of the Northwest, the capital request in the 2020 budget?
I have the capital right now.
Section of the tab.
She's looking at
So,
that.
it appears to be 824,000?
Yeah, so the 255 is the single biggest line item in our capital request right here.
Approximately a third,
So it's still your recommendation that you wouldn't do the 824? You wouldn't bond for the 824?
Well,
There are too many small projects?
small projects.
Yeah, it's 50 for nursing equipment, 80 for kitchen equipment, and so on and so forth. So real big hits, single big hits, other than this water.
and some of those are not bondable.
With bed replacements.
Well, we're not done. Okay.
So, Roland, you said something about Witherall and the 20-year bonding. It was always intended that projects renewed would be 20-year bonding. And then I remember a controversy and a very special vote, and I believe it was the additional $1 million or whatever that project was. And I remember certainly our caucus discussions over it, but there was a specific vote on Witherall to do that additional $1 million or whatever it is to bond it 20 years. But the intent was these small projects would be bonded. I mean, again, there's an average life. I don't know what the average life of these water heaters are, but clearly, it may not be 20 years, and so to bond over a 20-year term doesn't make any sense.
Right, and that's what we're saying. We look at these projects mixed with AC replacements, bed replacements,
Right, that's a 3 years now.
capital. So none of these are,
Even 5 years. None of them are even 5 years. Okay, but a water heater might be a 5-year project, but, or 7 years, it's really 7 years. That's all I have on that. Okay. I mean, not all I have on this project,
Any
but
other
the only one on
questions?
bonding.
Mr. Mason?
Do I have to wait to April?
They're,
Yes.
talk about it, their approach would be similar to the Board of Education did with their emergency capital items. They would.
So I have,
Which, just to be clear, it would be using operating funds to commit to pre-ordering
Yes.
some of this equipment so they're ready to install upon approval. There's a risk in doing that, right, that you don't get the approval?
You could use other funds in your operating budget to make the purchase, but if it is not approved by the RTM, those funds wouldn't be replaced.
For another month.
Then they have a headache.
The vote is spent, the vote is spent.
so,
So you're saying we have to wait till March?
April.
April?
Just give you my thought on the way you want to finance it. The Board of Ed's case, the Board of Ed has an enormous, your Board of Education versus theirs is enormous.
Understand.
What they did is they took maintenance and provided maintenance, knowing that if the RTM said no, that they were going to get rent for it at the end of the year. In your case, you don't have that. You don't have that flexibility because you don't have that big a 400 major object. So in the event you bid, the RTM does not backfill.
Yeah, I follow you there, but what happens next month if these fail and we have to evacuate the facility?
So even on the replacement of the system, your system is going to be down So you order the new equipment from Lokinavar, whatever it is?
10-day lead time.
And so you order it, meanwhile, your old system is up, the new equipment comes, and now during the installation process, 48 hours, 96 hours, how long is it?
The installation process would probably take over about a week because you would cycle the new boilers in as they're being installed. So if I go 10 days to purchase them, 2-week installation on top of that, we're looking at 24 days from today. If you say, go ahead, I can get the system up and running.
But your system,
Jeff, to answer your question, there's never a circumstance during installation when we don't have hot water.
and if you lose one of your boilers, you can still do the cycling process. You can have the other boilers support your domestic hot water and all your laundry process.
The boilers that are in there now? That's a good question.
If you lose one, you can continue to do that. We've had circumstances, I'm sure you have the provisions to replace these boilers. This is a series of boilers. There's 14. They're not all going to fail in one day.
If we, 14 boilers, 80% of them are not working right now. They're leaking. If I go to replace a heat exchanger in one of those boilers that are there right now, that's $10,000. If I go to replace the burning unit, that's $3,500. So if we fail, it's going to cost $13,500 plus installation to get one of those boilers working.
Jack, we can't solve your problem. We have a funding process that we cannot short circuit.
I understand that.
So the reality is, the best we can do for you, I don't know what the vote would be, but the best we can do for you is an interim appropriation, which goes to the RTM in March and puts funds available in April. The other choices for you are whether or not you can cover the funds to do a partial breakdown out of your operating budget. At the figures you're talking about, I believe that you definitely can. And you're obviously going to run a tensioning risk, but we can't solve your problem. This is the funding process.
Can I ask my members to be more orderly? We are calling on people, we're having an interactive conversation.
Right.
But
My apologies.
other people also have comments on the same item, so Ms. Tarkington.
So I have several questions here. First, you have directed the vendor. Has this project gone to purchasing?
No, it hasn't. That's not a vendor. That's the boiler
Or the
that
type
needs
of
to be
equipment.
put in. That's correct.
So, and do you plan to go to purchasing?
It depends. If this is an emergency request, which I would like it to be, that I need to do right now, I would like to use the town vendor, Hunter Mechanical, that is already able to spend $25,000 to do this on an emergency request. The other way I could possibly do this, which I don't really want to, but I could do it in increments. You figure if it's going to cost me $25,000 per boiler, and we have 7 boilers, that's $175,000, and I can do it in increments, at least now, to start to get the system to function reliably. But, excuse me, Leslie, but if we're up against a point where this could fail and we have to evacuate, that's an emergency request.
I have something on the timing. Is your other thing on the timing? Okay, I have the RTM tag. So just on the timing, if that's okay. So timing, just so you know, the RTM meets on March 11th, so that's 4 weeks.
We're already on the call.
Okay, you're on the call. Once the RTM acts, they then have access to the funds the next day. So it's not till April. So it's the night.
I have a copy of the resolution that was sent to the town clerk last week.
It's probably similar to what we've gotten. So no, it's the project, but it's the 4 weeks, and as Jeff indicated before, we only have certain authority. It's the RTM's authority to appropriate. So your strategies to get you from now to then, anything that you undertake to purchase, as we said before, it's your risk in case it weren't to operate.
in the Board of Ed situation that Mike referred to, they had insurance proceeds that would come eventually to true up their account so they could take the risk of spending funds out of their operating budget, waiting for either RTM approval or the insurance money to come. You know your financials better to know what kind of risk you can take on a partial purchase versus waiting until March 12th. So just on timing, I just wanted to resolve those particular issues. Ms. Tarkington, you had other questions.
I did. So I guess I would like this project to be reviewed by some other entity. And, you know, perhaps Alan Nelly come to another meeting. I think you're meeting with us next Thursday?
Wednesday's budget.
Wednesday, but sometime soon. And, you know, to have the project reviewed and some input, or perhaps the chair of the building committee, which I believe was Andy Fox, have Andy come back and give us some more input here. I guess I'm not prepared to proceed and support this without more input. Also, could you give...
Can I ask for clarification? What information are you looking for?
I'm looking for more information on why this system doesn't work, the town's experience, and just more input. And so, you know, from the project review, from either the former chairman of their building committee, who's very much involved here in town, or Al Manelli, the town's maintenance, and whatever.
Were
And
you
also-
were you
and
on the
also-
building were you on the building committee at this time? I can't recall the timing during.
I was on that building committee at the very beginning. I was on the building, I worked on forming the building committee and who would be on the building
Okay.
committee. I was on it very initially, and then I moved over to
Okay.
NISA. But no, not this kind of stuff. I've lost my train of thought here. But I had, I mean, this is the third replacement, as I understand it, and there's something here that concerns me. I also wanted to ask about the status of the other two projects that we've approved within the last, or I can't remember, in this fiscal year, or certainly within the last 12 months or so. And that is the tower project. Is there a C of O now? Is that project complete?
No, we won't get this C of O until we complete the project. And the town will give us a C of O as soon as we ask, but the state has to approve the project. So we're not going to ask the state to approve it until it's finished. And then they'll come down within 30 days.
And then what is the status of the project for the greenhouse? I mean, the one we approved in the last month or so.
That project is out to bid now.
So this is yet another project. Again, I'd be more comfortable here if this project were going out to bid also.
Actually, the bids are already in. We're waiting to award
On the greenhouse project.
on the greenhouse portion until the budget's approved.
Until the budget's approved. I thought the greenhouse did not go to the RTM? What do you mean, until the budget?
It's next year's budget.
The greenhouse. I'm a little confused. I thought we approved it subject to release.
Ms. Mason, any questions? No? Ms. Ferry?
I'm sympathetic to Mrs. Tarkington's desire to get a little more information. I think the information would be useful, but it wouldn't actually be determinative for me on whether I approve this item. I'd be inclined to vote on the item today to get it approved. I'd love to get a little further information to supplement Jack's obvious expertise in the area, just to try and better understand if this was defective product from the manufacturer, or if it was defective advice from the engineering that designed the system, or if the water turns out to be not as good as we thought it was, or heaven knows what else. But all those things would be interesting as to how you proceed, whether or not you want to run out and sue somebody or not sue somebody, whether or not you did well or badly with the choices that we made. But none of that governs for me the question about whether I'm inclined to approve this today. I think the events that are happening begin to dictate the necessity to approve this today for me, and I'd be inclined to vote on it today. But otherwise, Leslie, you're quite right, that all that information would be very interesting.
Well, I don't think it's more than impressive. It's fiscally appropriate, and also, if we're having all these failures, to hear from the chairman of the building committee, I think is worthwhile, so that we don't have these kind of failures in the future, and to understand, to make sure this other system will work, and that we're not going to continue this problem. To have to replace this 3 times in 4 years, and this is sort of the 4th time, to me, says something else. I don't know what it says, because I don't have enough information to understand.
Just to continue the conversation, I agree with Mr. Raymer. I think that we have this is not something I would hold up as far as voting today. I think the process needs to move forward. The prior replacements were replacement of the existing system, so we're really looking at one design versus a new design. But I think for the safety of the residents in Nathaniel Witherell, this has to move forward, and hopefully, if our committee passes it, it goes to the full BET next week before we have our meeting with Nathaniel Witherell on Wednesday, so I wouldn't want to hold that up. So is there a motion to approve the $255,000 interim appropriation from Jeff, seconded by Mike? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? What's your vote?
My vote is
Opposed. So 3-1-0. Tarkington's opposed. Okay. Thank you. Jill, yes.
It would be useful, Leslie, Vice President, if you could send an email with your identifying your questions so that when any little that becomes the whole BET, because I anticipate that some of this information will be useful to the other members who are not here this morning. Perhaps we have an opportunity to address Ms. Tarkington's questions at that time as well, so that we can have a full discussion. I know once it goes to the RTM often asks the BET whether they've considered various issues that have come up, and I would like to be able to say yes.
So this should be a non-routine item.
Yes.
May I ask if I could just send that as I normally do to the chairman and as well? Okay, I just want to make sure that.
Mr. Mason.
The BET meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 19th.
It's the 20th at 9 in the morning, isn't it?
Right, that's to review next year's budget, but this particular item will go to the full BET the night before.
Tuesday the 19th at 6:30 in the town hall meeting room.
Once I have the exact agenda, I'll from Alan a more specific time, but it will probably be close to starting at 6:45.
Mr. Mason.
Just what would be helpful is the list of equipment. I'm pretty sure all these boilers are rated for 30-year lives, not 2014 to 2019. I think.
I would say they were, but Armstrong doesn't make them anymore.
No, I understand. I think it would help a lot of clarification to show, because I think you're demonstrating a point of urgency, and we have 2014 equipment that's, something's not right. Whether it was architectural design, the way you installed it, I don't know what it was. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think that's going to be the catch of everybody saying, well, why do we have a problem? And I think you should continue to figure out why we have a problem. But this is firsthand to set you up for March 11th with the RTM.
All right. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, we have nothing in old business. Under new business, we have the senior tax credit ordinance.
No, I don't know this stuff. No. I
So-
fooled you.
Just to give a little background, this ordinance, which has been acted, I guess the ordinance or the concept's been acted upon by the Board of Selectmen. We've asked for the BET to discuss it just to understand implications on our financials. However, the BET doesn't have a role really in ordinances typically. It's an RTM authority. But we thank you for coming this morning and to help us. Yes, exactly. We want to know the budgetary impact of this particular ordinance, and that's why the BET is interested. So with that, I will let you introduce the topic and the proposal.
For the record, I'm Kip Bergweiger, a member of the Commission on Aging.
And I'm Lori Contadino, Director of the Commission on Aging.
And I will observe that the ordinance which we're dealing with does require BET approval.
Oh, it does, okay. Thank you.
So it's more than just information.
What, may I?
Yes,
I'm looking at section 71 of the charter, which says that all authority to adopt ordinances and bylaws with respect to all other matters, I'll talk about what that is, shall be subject to the provisions of any special act, shall be exercised by the representative town meeting. When it said all other matters, it referred to the prior sentence, which said all authority to adopt ordinances and bylaws regulating traffic and parking in the town shall be exercised by the Board of Selectmen. I mean, we're happy to hear it, happy to help you, Kip, in any way, but maybe I'm missing something, but I thought that the sole responsibility and authority to grant this ordinance is in the hands of the RTM, and that the rest of what we have to say is gratuitous comment that may be listened to or may not be, but I don't think we really have any standing to amend the ordinance. There will be some amendments we're going to talk to you about if we may, but I don't think we actually have any standing to thrust amendments into it. We're just advisory or gratuitous. Is there something I'm missing, Kip?
This ordinance, I'll back up to, I just have a couple of some handouts here, which I
Okay,
can
that's great.
provide.
We do.
We have that.
We do. I mean, I just wanted to answer to Jeff's comment. I mean,
I'm sorry, I missed it.
I'm just questioning whether it needs to come to the BET. Dean McLaughlin, I believe at your meeting.
Yes, in the ordinance itself, it talks about the BET has to approve the ordinance. It's like one of the last lines in the.
The state has a law which authorizes municipalities to adopt ordinances which provide for credits for seniors and totally permanently disabled people for credit on their real property tax. And the state law provides that the municipal ordinance needs to be reviewed by the financial officers, in our case, the BET. So even though our charter doesn't require the BET to approve ordinances, the state law does have a provision requiring the financial overseers or the BET to review and give its approval. And the ordinance that we're dealing with, the town ordinance, does have language. And if you look, I have this page, which is the amendments.
Yes.
The back page, section 19, this is the language that as it now appears and it does require that it be submitted to the BET as well as the RTM.
And I gather from what's bold and not bold, to Beth's point, that Section 18 of the existing ordinance, which is now expiring, reads, "All provisions of this ordinance as amended shall cease to be effective on June 30th, 2019, unless an ordinance extending this ordinance is properly submitted to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and the representative town meeting, and approved prior to that date."
Yeah.
So quite apart from the statute that you're referring to, which I'm embarrassed to say I'm not familiar with, but to Beth's point, the language of the existing ordinance requests the approval of all three bodies on the extension of it, and that by itself would be reason enough for us to be considering.
Right, right.
Right, my apologies for misunderstanding the governing law.
But just to clarify, this language is in the ordinance because of the state law.
Thank you.
So the, as mentioned, the ordinance as it now exists will expire on June 30th, and the Commission on Aging is asking that the ordinance be, the sunset clause be amended to add 10 years, 2029. In the packet that you received, the PowerPoint has a typographical error. The last page says that the amendment will be 2024, I believe, but it should be 2029.
The one we have says 2029.
Okay, the one I had pulled off the town website.
He said the PowerPoint.
Oh, I see.
Which says
the PowerPoint, oh. No, but the ordinance has this.
The ordinance,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry.
Yes. So,
I think the PowerPoint was prepared, it doesn't have a date on it. The PowerPoint was prepared before any of this was done. There's the anticipation of this. Is that not correct, Jeff?
I think.
We asked the assessor to do some work when there was some discussion of this, but it hasn't been updated, to be honest. It doesn't include
Right.
the disabilities, et cetera, but it was circulated just because it, you know, it's got some good information. But the assessor was busy also preparing some
Well,
information for
right.
budgets next week and so forth, and our revenue stream and so forth, so we never asked her to update this practice. And I should add here that it was her intent and expectation to be at our meeting, and she certainly planned to be at our meeting last night at 5 p.m. But then, as Pete knows, after town hall was determined to be closed, she still had to return home, and this morning her driveway was only being plowed at, almost 7 o'clock, so she was waiting, it was there, but she's just late in arrival after town hall from home. But she had planned to be here,
She's been an incredible help to us, so we work cooperatively with the assessor on this initiative. And there are multiple things that we've been seeking to accomplish coming forward, not only because we sunset in 2019, so the 10-year extension, but to include that permanently disabled individuals also receive a tax credit, and so we know that that could have a budgetary impact. Additionally, 5 years ago, when we appeared before the RTM, it was the Finance Committee, Kip, that...
Finance for sure, and I believe legislative and rules as well.
Right, that suggested that our grid with 4 levels of eligibility be expanded so that there wasn't as wide a spread, say a $13,500 spread in income, that we would narrow those income ranges and give a benefit, for each of the subsequent ranges. That also has a budgetary impact, which Lauren, I'm not sure if this was shared with you previously, but Lauren did take the expanded grid and with the 2017 numbers, she projected that by expanding the grid, it would cost us $40,270 more.
To include the disabled.
No, to include just the expansion of the grid.
Okay, thank you.
So that would bring us, again, based on the 2017 numbers, which is all we know, that would bring us to a total of $45,644. as an
It's
aggregate.
It's the second page of the
It's,
handout.
right, okay. Now, what we learned in going through this process with Lauren is that there are currently 22 individuals that receive a tax exemption for their permanent disabled status. They would be eligible if this passes ultimately, but they also have to qualify by income. And then once they reach age 65, then they, their disability basically is no longer the issue, then they would qualify under age. We don't think that there are going to be that many individuals that will affect us in terms of, a budgetary impact in terms of the permanently disabled individuals, but it's something that we have to be cognizant of.
The numbers that Lauren found in looking at this initially was 22 people qualified as permanently disabled, and only 2 had the income limits. So the impact of adding disability to the ordinance is very small.
Well, I think that she didn't really, she was aware of 2 just because they come in, but I don't think that she has no, to the best of my knowledge, she had no information, financial information on those others too. I think that there's just an unknown at this point in time. And Lauren could have responded to this.
Right.
But as far as I know, I think the state program just requires you to show your disability. It doesn't require the financial information. Now, her department will be processing the financial information exactly as they do with the elderly tax relief. And so this year, next year at this time, she would know.
Right.
Yeah.
We have no way to
Than
measure.
she would know today. But
Even worst case,
But she thought at this point it would be arranged somewhere in between what you're talking about and the upside.
Correct. Thank you.
but it's a small, very small impact from what we can judge at this point.
Given that during the renewal of this kind of ordinance, it's always an opportunity to take a look at the basic assumptions and to compare potentially what Greenwich offers versus other towns. And I'm not sure what process you went through. I know you've spent a lot of time on this looking at our ordinance, but do you know how our ordinance compares to what other communities offer?
Kip did extensive research of communities in our surrounding area.
See where I put it.
I may have it in here.
I should have forwarded that question to you earlier, so I apologize.
This is based on last year's numbers. And Stamford has a range of income from 0 to 85,000, and their credits range from 2,000 down to 500. So although their income range is larger than ours, their credit range is smaller, and their forgetting the term, well, anyway, the mill rate. The mill rate is higher. In fact, the mill rate is higher in all of these towns, so their credit is not as impactful as ours. Westport's income ranges from 0 to 65,000. Ours is capped at 66,000. Well, I'm talking about, these are last year's figures. You're right, this year is 68. Westport's credit is at the 0 level is $4,346, and at the $65,000 level, it's $1,242. So their income level is a little less than ours, but their credit is about twice. But again, I think their mill rate will be higher as well. Norwalk.
You have on that list also the value of the home, because my understanding that we allow for a program housing that is much higher value. I mean, right now, just because prices are softer, correct, I believe
That-
do the research on that? 'Cause that would
I
be
do not
interesting.
have those
That, I mean,
figures.
just for your future reference, I think that would be interesting, because it's my understanding that we try to make our program available to anyone who's, you know, having these income issues, whereas most other communities have a much, much lower limit on the value of the home, and expect people to take reverse mortgages or something to get to this kind of payment process. Again, this is just a comment, unfortunately,
And New Canaan, their credit, their income range is from 0 to 60,000 as of last year, and their credit for married taxpayers at the highest level is 3,000, goes down to 1,200. So it's higher, their credit is higher than ours. Their range is a little bit less, the income range is a little bit less. And then Fairfield goes from 0 to 70,000, and they have a credit based on a percentage of tax due with a cap not to exceed from 5,000 at the highest level to 1,400 at the lowest level. But I frankly couldn't figure out how they calculated using the percentage, so I don't have a real figure that's comparable to ours.
When you put your proposal together, was it primarily just an updating of the numbers of what we currently offer, or did you backward determine what the credit should be based on the approximate size that we've allocated in the budget previously? So how did you get, were the numbers generated, were just inflated from the prior regulation, or was there a study done over what levels they should be?
Well, we looked at other communities just to get a sense of what other towns were doing and how we compared to that, and found with respect to the mill rate and the others that we were in a fair range comparable to them. So we stayed with the existing numbers that are in the ordinance as it was drafted in 2009, and then just split those numbers for income levels and credit levels. And of course, since they get recomputed every year, that's how we're now at a 68,000 for the maximum. But we didn't we wanted to minimize the amount of change that would be made in the ordinance because we wanted to make it clear, and it's something that the town has lived with since 2000. So
Right.
we didn't want to go too far afield.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Mr. Mason?
This is just a question of sort of how do you explain this outside of the groups involved? How do you qualify total income?
It's in the ordinance.
How do you just?
I mean, Lauren, the assessor, receives the income tax returns of the applicants, and she uses that information to determine what the income is. And then the income, what constitutes, is included and excluded from income is in the ordinance as it now stands, and she takes the information she gets from tax returns and calculates.
So non-taxable income would still be a depiction on your taxes. It's just there'd be no tax obligation for it.
Well, non-taxable income on the ordinance is Social Security payments for a dependent person or minor child, casualty loss or reimbursements by insurance companies, gifts, bequests, or inheritance except for interest produced by the gift, bequest, or inheritance, grants for disaster relief, income through volunteer service under the Domestic Volunteer Service Act of 1973 as amended. Frankly, I have no idea what that is. Life insurance proceeds for married homeowners whose spouse is a resident of a health or nursing facility. Total income excludes the Social Security income for that spouse if the certain factors have been submitted to the assessor to establish this, and food stamps and child support payments. So those are the kind of things that are excluded. Everything else, that you.
Okay, the point I'm trying to make is, obviously, we're not circulating the ordinance, but it is, that's all been consistent since we've invented this.
Yes.
Also, it follows certain state regulations because there's also a state program which is 100% funded by the town over the last couple of years, as you all know. And I don't think we publicize that widely enough that we've continued the state program, but we lost all the state funding for the program. And because I think that, first, I think we thought we were doing it sort of out of our goodness, but we also have more recently, Lauren has read the state regulations to us, and these people, once they apply to the program, or they think of it, do it forever. But the more important point is all of this, and some of it also is required. It's a very detailed, think about the assessor's office that has to review every single one of these applicants for all of this financial information. It's a huge job to go through this process every spring. Right now, they're applying for the program, but now they're applying for the whole, and then when they submit the information, then it not only has to be reviewed by the category, so it's part of the department's workload, but it's a detailed process. And you've just gone through many details, the public, and you can see, when you have staff work with everyone. I mean, to get all the information, they have to work with the people. Some of them are extreme elderly. I think Laura Insurance showed that some of these people are well into their hundreds.
Yes, and
they've owned their house well over 70 some odd years. So, it's to even make sure you get the information and you're compliant with the state laws and so forth. Sometimes
so I did some calculations. I thought you might be interested in the age stratification. So in individuals in their 60s that receive a credit, there's 47. Individuals in their 70s, 175. In their 80s, 236. In their 90s, 132. And 100 or over are 8. Now, this is based on the 27...
8 applicants are
Right.
over 100?
So this is based on the 2017 numbers, which is all I had available. And we know that the numbers are trending downward in terms of individuals receiving the credit. And it's hard for us to speculate as to why that actually is. We do believe we lose folks that move out of our town. We lose people that move on to heaven. We know that this is also market affected, and because of market fluctuations last year, that could impact the number of individuals that were just on the border and didn't qualify last year but may qualify this year. And so we're changing a variety of components, which is what we're seeking approval of. But each of these components can affect the bottom line, and I guess that's the budgetary concern that we're here to discuss. So we're adding disabled individuals, we're expanding the income grid, and it all does have an impact, and recognizing also that we have the responsibility for the state portion as well.
Which is new. I mean, we never
Right.
recognized that we were required to do it before.
And we learned that this year, going through this process. We were unaware.
So, it's a combination of.
So I guess to move ahead, I know that there may be a couple of suggested bonifications to what is proposed for us. So maybe the process we'll follow is we'll move to put this, to approve this, and then go through amendments that someone may have on particular aspects to it. So may I have a motion to approve?
The senior property tax relief proposal version 6, which is the
Yeah, it's section 12-6.1 of the municipal code, and I would second that motion.
Okay. So are there amendments to modify the proposal that's before us?
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
I would like to move that we substitute a chart prepared by Lauren, which
Page 5 of the.
On page 5 of the agenda.
No,
with-
no,
I mean,
of the ordinance. Yeah.
proposal of the ordinance with a new chart that just takes exactly the same ranges and the numbers as they are today with the fiscal 18. So the first category would start less than 27,000, and that number would be 2,352, and then it would go up to the last range. The range is basically emulating your ranges, except being put into the grant list as of October 1st, 2018, which is the program that went out to. The top range would be $62,001 to $68,000. And that number, instead of the 500 that you have here, would be 619. Now, this was prepared by Lauren. It's my understanding that everything is actually identical to what would be delivered. It just makes it less confusing for the public if you start with the dates that were actually out.
Okay, so I'm going to just rephrase that for the minutes purposes so that we agree on the language, and that is to substitute the income and tax credit chart with a revised chart that updates those values for inflation since 2009.
Which would say, instead of values, annual income and property tax credits.
Updates annual income and property tax credits. Do you have that, Kathy?
Just to be complete, if I may.
Wait.
It-
For inflation since 2009.
So there are dates cited in subsection 8A1 and 8A2, which would need to be changed. They introduced the table we're talking about, and they would be changed, I assume, to July 1, 2019, and in subsection 1, and July 1, 2020 in subsection 2, I assume. You see that in the text of the, if you're going to change the table, you need to
Right.
change the dates which reference the table.
Is it 2000?
They both have become 10 years later.
Yes. So,
On page 5, I'm looking at the red line copy. I don't know if the pagination changes without the red line. I'm on page 5, which is where the table appears. If you take a look at the paragraph that precedes the table, it introduces the table as being the table applicable to 2009. It would now have to be the table applicable to 2019.
Is that right?
Computation of the taxes for the fiscal year commencing. Well, in candor, to answer your question, is that right? I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
What
no,
what year
that's
what
right.
what year did Lauren use to calculate her table?
You're correct.
It's off of the
It would
2009.
be July 1st, 2019, just as you said, in point number in
No.
1, and it would be July 1st,
2020.
2020 in your point number 2, just
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
as
yeah.
you
It's just I like your amendment. I just don't want to leave an error behind. It would be a little confusing to the public.
and, can I ask a question? Ms. Crumick, I don't know if you're following those particular changes, but
Figure out why these changes weren't brought up before the law. Why are we now getting another set of another grid?
They're identical, it's just so that it's for the ease. Right now, if anyone picks this up, they're going to have to figure out the inflation rate for 10 years over the grid on the left, and for 10 years on the grid on the right. This only simplifies it. It's exactly the same numbers, it's approved by everyone, it just makes it current and easier to read back.
well, just to refer, this ordinance doesn't refer to any inflation rate. So without this change, it would be using those values, correct? Where does it refer to using inflation? It does?
It's on page 6, is the assessment revaluation, and then you have the, it's That's the formula for calculating
Can I just make a comment to that
Yes,
question?
sure.
We received just yesterday an updated grid from Lauren. That would be the 2018 numbers. So when we went through last week, the most up-to-date data
number
we
C.
had was the 2017 numbers, which is how
11.
the grid was calculated. So that's the discrepancy in the numbers that we're talking about today. Lauren then went back, applied the formula, and told us what those values would be. Just yesterday, we received that.
I guess my frustration is that the law committee didn't receive the same information.
So the question then would be, so the ordinance is currently written on page 7. Beth, if you can look at it on page 7, item C, so it would be 11C. It talks about the adjusting the percentage increase by the CPI. So the question, that should change if, so people don't, well.
I don't disagree that you've got to update it.
Okay. But I want to make sure this is internally consistent. Right. I want to make sure it's internally consistent. If we're referring to current year numbers, then we don't want to start inflating on top of what we're already including.
The date
So,
in C needs to be 2021.
well, shouldn't it be 2020 because we're using 2019 CPI? It should be 2020.
It should be July 1st when, because the inflation rate has already been adjusted for the July 1st.
19.
20, no, 20. It's
No.
already been adjusted. It's just been adjusted. What Lauren has adjusted for is and the applicants now are applying for the program for July 1st.
We have another besides.
2020, and the new program that you're putting in place is for July 1st, 2021, and so therefore, this should be July 1st, 2021. Again, the 10-year difference, just as the same way it had the 10 years,
Right,
each
but,
of the other numbers.
so,
Because-
but then why on page 5 are we saying 2019?
Because that's,
So that's for the fiscal 20, I think in terms of fiscal year. So this is for the fiscal year 20 taxes. The reason in number 2, it's fiscal 21 is because that's when the revaluation's going to occur. But in this section on page 7, that should follow, it should be fiscal 21, which starts July 1, 2020.
no, it says for fiscal year commencing.
Right, so that's fiscal 20. We don't want it to be fiscal year 22. We want it fiscal year 21, so it should be 2020.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I should have been on the BET then.
So we're changing the date. By the way, on page 6 in B1, the 2010 there has to become 2020. You see where I'm looking?
Yep.
And then on page 7 in subsection C, 11C, as I think was already pointed out by Leslie Moriarty, that has to be not 2021 but 2020.
Right. And then on the last page, effective date,
Oh, yeah.
I would think we'd want to update the 2010 dates if this is a new ordinance.
This ordinance should be effective with that, is accepted.
So it's
for
for,
2020.
is it accepted February 2019 or February 2020?
No, 20.
It's for next year,
Yeah,
right?
it's for next year.
Well, the ordinance has to be effective July 1 of 2019 because we expire on June 30th of this
No,
year.
but it's for, if you take
For-
a look at
for
section 17
applications,
on
look at
page
the
8,
wording.
For applications, it's for February
applications being
1st
accepted.
of the year.
2020.
Not a year
Right,
from,
correct.
not this month, but a year from now.
And
which is-
tax relief, and the taxes, and that affects the taxes that start in July 2020. Okay, so both those go to 2020.
2020, yeah. I hope we've gotten them all.
So I don't think there's
So with
And
a,
these are exactly the same things, really, approved by the Board of Selectmen. It's just making.
well, I think this is going to need to go back to this. There'll be other amendments, I believe, also, but I believe it's going to have to go back to the Board of Selectmen so that everybody will have approved the same draft. I would second Leslie's motion.
I'm just sorry, the first, the one, the date on page 5, the first page,
On page
A1.
5, on the page 5,
A1.
I'm looking at the red mark copy, so the pagination may be different on the clean copy.
I'm looking at red.
But in subsection 1, the 2009 becomes 19.
that is still 19.
Yeah, in subsection 2, subsection, the 2010 becomes 2020. Over on the next page, page 6, subsection B, 1,
Right.
the 2010 becomes 2020. They're all just 10 years later.
Yep.
Except there's one that seems to be an error. On page 7, in sub 11C, the 2011 should become 2020, not 21. Okay, and then, as was pointed out laterally in the last page, in paragraph 17, there's two 2010s, which should become 2020s. Are we all on the same page with that, Kip?
Yeah.
Yeah, February, July, yeah.
And those should have been changed anyway, because this now incorporates things like the disability, so there's no.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
and I've seconded Leslie's motion.
Okay, so that motion is one, so now we've expanded your motion, if that's okay, to change the chart and change the dates. Is that okay? And Jeff seconded it.
I'm seconding that motion.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you don't have one version approved by all three bodies, which, as was pointed out to us, is what the prior ordinance requires, and state statute.
Let me rephrase.
It's a process.
So we can modify it, it goes back to the Board of Selectmen. They can disagree or agree, then the RTM still has a right to modify it. If they modify it, does it have to go back to the Board of Selectmen again?
And
Does
us.
it have to come back to us?
Yeah. Welcome to the game of ping pong.
May I ask a question? Sure. Since the changes truly weren't substantive, truly in nature, we know that the grid is a variable. Does it have to go back to the Board of Selectmen? We had asked this question when we met with the law committee because there was some fine tuning that came out of that. And Jean McLaughlin had advised us that as long as we informed the Board of Selectmen of what the changes were, that we could continue on the process. Are these changes substantive enough that we
I believe you're
should go
going to
back?
hear another amendment, which may be more substantive,
Got
which
it.
will render that question moot.
Thank you.
Okay.
But I would just add that, we're not the law department, we have a law committee of stuff that's pointed out.
Right,
But
right.
Steve McLaughlin is the town's lawyer.
Right.
And these changes, there is one though that is incorporated. That's one of those last changes is critical because it doesn't really incorporate the disabilities because of the date changes. It didn't have some of these, and it also didn't incorporate the, also expanding this to including the residences that are in trust where the homeowner is the beneficiary. So this is added things, but the way the final things are.
So let's,
it hadn't really- so anyway,
let's
I-
keep,
I think
let's,
you go back to Dean McLaughlin and ask them.
Okay.
all right,
Run
so,
that by and the.
so can I call for a vote on that amendment? All those in favor? Aye. So that's 4-0. Okay, and I believe there's another amendment, Ms. Tarkington?
So, another amendment that I want to put on the table for discussion.
It's subsection 2, the 1-year, 5-year. Shall I make the motion? So drawing attention to subsection 2, which makes the relief available to someone with a qualifier that they have to have been an owner of the real estate for 1 year immediately preceding their receipt of the tax benefits. I would like to propose that the 1 year would be better if it read 5 years.
And are you making that as a motion?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did, or if you like, you make it your motion.
That's fine, and I will
Okay.
second the motion. And I'm fine.
That's-
So I second the motion.
Okay, can I ask a question? Is this an issue that Kip and Lori, you had looked at or thought when you proposed this motion, or you just continued what was in that prior ordinance?
We continued what was in the prior ordinance, but I think that historically, from the information Lauren has shared, the number of years that the recipients of this benefit have been in those households has been greater than that 1 year limit that was proposed. So,
And this is something that Lauren had talked about a month or so ago. With the liaison with the assessor's office as times are changing. The whole benefit here was that we expect to keep as many seniors in their homes as long as possible. It was not necessarily the impact that we're beginning to see more and more people moving into condominiums or co-ops that have moved into Greenwich from outside of Greenwich. And so this would extend the program for those who have been benefiting and also encourage the money to be used for people who want to stay in their homes.
Any, Mr. Mason?
So this amendment, I understand you want somebody to be, quote, residing for 5 years rather than 1 year. What happens if they're residing in a piece of property they sell and they take up a new residence in the town, but they haven't been residing in that residency for 5 years, so they downsize. They want to go from a house to a condo, for example, but they haven't lived in the condo for 5 years.
In-
They are, it's residency, it's their residency. So if they were living in their home, for years, it's about residency, it's about,
Just to refer to the actual language in the ordinance, it says, qualifying for tax relief must be taxpayers of real property located in the town for 1 year for 5 years. So it doesn't say the same real property. It just says be a taxpayer. A homeowner, or property owner, I should say, not even home, a property owner for a certain period of time.
My comments would have been exactly what Leslie said.
So any other questions or concerns? Are we ready to, I mean, to me, that seems like a reasonable change. If I understand, I think there had been some description about other communities and that Greenwich did have one of the shortest residency requirements than most other communities. And the target of the program does appear to be allowing our residents to be able to stay in the community as long as possible. So are we ready to vote? All
Yes.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm a believer that when you change something like this, there's a reason we're changing it. And I believe there's always something that comes out of this that we didn't anticipate.
Right. Yeah, there were.
Good luck.
yes, and please share it with us once it comes to mind, yes.
I believe you'll be the first to know.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm sure also Lauren will share as this, issues. I mean, generally, Lauren comes before this board in May, and generally updates us to the best of her ability to the program and what's happening because of our computation of the mill rate. And so, I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Lauren, but I would also add that this doesn't go into effect this year. The program has already been publicized for this year, as you well know.
Absolutely.
And the eligibility for this year's program is based on the chart that we've just approved.
Just to clarify, Mike, did you vote in favor of that? Yes, okay. So now, were there any other amendments to the
Yes,
particular?
there's one more. Jeff, you want to do this one? You
No,
did such a
I-
great
I
job.
I was indifferent with this, and I'm not going to make this motion. I'll let you make that motion.
Okay. So, okay, so in this case, I move that we amend the section to reduce the term of the program from 10 years to 5 years before its next renewal. This would be similar to the extension period for each of the town's local property tax relief programs in the past. In addition, it gives us the chance to update it. I mean, again, I think this update actually is positive for the residents because we've added the disabilities and we've also added the seniors who have placed their homes in trust for the benefit of and occupied by such residents. So that's something new that is a benefit to our local property owners and taxpayers. So I think this overall program is excellent, but this just gives a review, 5 years. It's always been a 5-year program.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Is there a second to this motion? Second, okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, I expanded on it. I think I've said everything I need to say.
Did you consider the term? What was the rationale for your extending the 5 years to 10? The prior one was?
It was 10 years.
Was 10 years, okay. So you're reducing it.
The prior one, I thought the prior one was 5 years.
It was 5 years.
5 years.
But I'm looking at what I'm seeing here.
Because it was approved by the Board of Selectmen for 10. So what just came out of the Board of Selectmen meeting was an
But the
extension
old
for 10.
version, I'm looking at the red line.
So
The
the
old
2014
version
version
showed
was 5.
an expiration on oh, I see. So I can't tell from that.
Okay. Sure.
This is what I heard the Board of Selectmen discuss, and at the time I thought, okay, that sounds reasonable. But when I look at the changes we're making at the 5-year mark, and I think they're beneficial changes for the people it affects. If we do this for 10 years, what's going to happen is it's just going to be 10 years, and we're not going to look at the things that change over 5 years. So where I was actually in favor of what the Board of Selectmen did, in retrospect, I think there's just no downside to looking at this after 5 years, because we're making improvements to it every time we look at it. I just don't think it hurts anything.
Can I tell you that I agree?
Okay.
Even though I don't like going through this process, it just, it feels like as soon as we finish, we have to start again. I think there are so many variables now that we need to track and to measure what the impact is, in addition to our tax collector putting the notice on the tax bills to heighten awareness that this program exists. We just need to measure what the impact of all of these different things
So
will be.
you'd be in favor of the 5-year sunset instead of 10 years?
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Sure.
You swayed me. All those,
Yeah, swayed
and you
me
swayed
too,
me.
yeah.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So 4-0. Okay. Are there any other amendments? No. So can I'm going to take a vote on the motion as amended. We've approved 3 amendments to update the income chart and the property tax credit chart, the dates, increasing the residency requirement from 1 to 5 years, and reducing the term to 5 years. All those in favor of the motion as amended?
Aye.
Aye. So that passes 4-0. And Jean will tell you then what your next, well, first it goes to the.
I think I know what we need to do now.
First, it goes to the full BET. So this is going to be our
So
recommendation
we still have that?
Yeah, we're
for
not the
next
full
Tuesday
BET,
night.
Tuesday
but
night.
Tuesday night, the full
Okay.
BET we'll
And
vote on.
so,
At 6:30.
and we'll present with the amendments that we just discussed now?
So the tip,
Oh, you're going to, okay.
But I do think,
so Jill will clarify.
Okay.
I think she probably will want you there, but Jill can clarify before that meeting of what. But I will present a report from this committee on our votes.
We'll be there.
Okay.
We do not need to type up a version 7 with these changes.
No.
You'll do that.
Well, a lot
Arrange
of
to
our
have
will
it
do it,
done.
yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you for.
Now,
Thank you guys for all you
Thank you
do,
for
by
your
the way.
insight.
I'm sorry to drag you over here for this early like this, but altogether, we're appreciative of all you do
All right.
at the Commission on Aging.
So for my members, we have to give up this room in 4 minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes in front of us. Now, the minutes that were in your packet there's been some suggested changes that you've been privy to, I believe, through email. But can I have a motion to approve the December 11th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so the document in our packet has had some revised language to section on FD2 that both Leslie and Jeff have agreed upon, that writing that was sent to you. Can we just approve the minutes as modified by Mr. Raymer and Ms. Tarkington?
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Then on the January 15th minutes, as in your packet, there were no changes to these minutes.
I'd move those minutes.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Tarkington.
Yeah, exactly.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On the January 24th minutes, there were a few, I would say, slight clarifications in these minutes, nothing substantive. Can I have a motion to approve these minutes
So moved.
Second.
referenced as indicated? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And then on January 31st, there were one change to the discussion over the master plan. I believe Ms. Tarkington and I agreed on what those changes would look like. They were sent in an email. If we can implement those and get the motion,
I'd
the
move
minutes
those
approved then.
changes.
I also want to delete the reference to day one, since we don't normally talk about Board of Ed being our day one.
That's fine.
So
I
can I
adopt
have
that. So
a
moved.
vote on those minutes?
I second it.
Okay,
Aye.
so all the minutes approved 4-0, and our next meeting, well, we meet frequently over the next couple of weeks, so I'll see you all very soon.
Yes, you will.
Get a motion to adjourn.
So
I
moved.
moved that too.
Second it.
Aye on that. Mike, you came for any particular reason? Just, you can't tear yourself away from us, or? Okay.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know why that would be, but that's all right.